Hi. Well, welcome to this episode of Prophecy for the Last Hour. I have a good friend, brother in the Lord, Laverne Gooding, with me today. And we are going to take on, again, some real meat. We are together going to talk about the Essenes, which we both believe in one accord that this is the family, the people group, the religious denomination, so to speak, that Yeshua, John the Baptist, all of the players of the children of light in the New Testament come from. And I'm going to let Laverne introduce himself and give you some of his information. We're fellow YouTubers, so I'm going to turn it over to you, Laverne, and tell everybody who you are.
Well, thank you. My name is Laverne. I have a YouTube channel called TrustinJC. All the information will be provided. I've been discussing things with Liz for quite some time now. She is one of my go-to channels. I respect her, and I respect the work that she's doing in trying to bring this information to light, that there's much more to God's written word than what is found in the Bible. I've explained in my videos that God's library is much larger than the 66 books that many Christians like to believe contains or is God's entire library. So, excuse me, that's what my channel is about. It's about sharing information that Jesus, the early apostles, and the majority of the early Christians were in fact Essenes.
Right.
That's about what, and end-time prophecy.
Right.
I speak a great deal to end-time prophecy.
So we have a lot in common, and to me, this is all, that this is the last days, that the elect are receiving the download of the knowledge that's being released. The books are being opened. People, it's a free banquet. I said, come and just, feast on all the truth that's being outpoured. But, and I'll just say this to Laverne and I, are in a category which I believe is completely biblical, of lay researchers, which is really, I don't have any credentials. You all know this watching my channel. I am just a voracious reader of primary texts through the lens of the Ruach HaKodesh, and I believe that's perfectly adequate. The apostles were not learned men. I have nothing against learned men. If I could have started my life over earlier on this track, I would have gone and gotten a Hebrew degree and, gone to seminary. But God called me to this later in the game, so it is what it is. But we're not going to let that hold us back, right, Laverne?
Exactly, and I'm the same way. I'm in no way can I claim to be an academic or a scholar. It's all layperson researching, but there are so many prophets from the Old Testament that this is how they were called as well, many of them later in their lives. So hopefully people won't be holding that against.
Right. So what I want, that's my husband going through, we're living a very active household here. But anyways, we're going to talk about the Essenes. Now this, I think a little bit of listen to me have known. I feel like a mission right now, because some of you don't even know where to start, but I have to say this. We each have in the elect, I believe, sort of a little area of specialty. I'm beginning to really understand my area of specialty. It is becoming what's known as oral Torah, Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah, the Zohar, unpacking the keys to the kingdom. This is something that I'm very focused on. But, and Laverne has tremendous knowledge. He's written a book, and we're going to put this book in the link, and he can tell you how to access it and everything. He's going to give it away. Anyone who's interested. So, look for that in the description box. But there is a gentleman that is on YouTube, because we're YouTubers. This is how we're disseminating our information. There's another gentleman that is very prolific on YouTube right now, Gary Wayne, and it's just been mind-boggling to me and to Laverne as I'm finding out to other people who have done their homework, have read the primary text of the Dead Sea Scrolls, studying deeply, how someone like this can be making the claims they make with no citations, okay? And so we want a citation back and say, you can't possibly say that. And we will refute it scripturally and with, like I said, the extra canonical books, history, Josephus, these different things. So I'm going to do a YouTube. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm interviewing Laverne here, and I have some other people I want to bring on my channel that I know are reputable Dead Sea Scroll researchers and scholars, and from different angles we're going to refute this, and then hopefully we're going to make a larger overarching video, because it's very important, because it is my opinion that we live at the end of the age, that knowledge shall increase. The books, as it says in Enoch, will be opened. This is our information, and I do believe that someone like Gary Wayne coming on the scene saying, who has written a book called Genesis 6, I don't know about the rest of his information. I do know that what he says about the Essenes is patently false. Okay, so that's what I can address. That's what Laverne can address. So I'm going to let you just comment on that, Laverne.
Yeah, I think it's so important, and I agree with much of what the Hebrew Roots movement is doing. And that is that we have to look at Scripture through the lens and the context and culture that it was written in. Unfortunately, for many Christians, to them, that means reading it through the lens and culture of the Pharisees. They look at first century Phariseeism and the canon that the Pharisees had, and they think that by going back to first century Judaism, that they are then reading Scripture through its proper lens and culture. But that's not the case. Jesus was in constant conflict with the Pharisees and Sadducees. It is the Essenes that it is their lens and their culture that we should be reading Scripture through. And then you have somebody like this, Gary Wayne, comes on the scene, and he says, no, there's something very wrong with the Essenes. They are basically of the devil, and we should be avoiding everything that the Essenes taught. And so I believe we are in a spiritual war right now that is nothing like what it was or hasn't been for many, many centuries. In the very beginning, in first century Christianity and second century, they had to deal with this as well. But for a long time, mainstream Christianity has had its way, and many of these books were hidden. The truth has been hidden. And I believe now that we are in the last hour of the end days, this veil is beginning to be removed. And we are part of that. We are taking part in that removal process of the veil, hopefully being able to open the eyes of people who have been lied to, and their parents have been lied to, and their grandparents for generations and generations. And we have this Gary, he's just one example. I know there are other examples as well, but there are many people saying that the Essenes are someone that we need to stay away from, and worse than that, that they are going to be the ones who bring about the New World Order, and they're part of the Illuminati and so on. In
Freemasons.
Yeah, and it's absolute lies.
Right. So this is what I think is going on. All right. See, the thing is, the enemy, we're in a propaganda war. I've always said this. It is truth that is always at stake here. And it's always information control. Much of our history, the church, it's always been, it's a battle of who controls the dissemination of information controls the day. Now, I believe because so many people are researching the days of Noah, let's just say, antediluvian, the days of Noah, the giants, the Nephilim, the serpent seed doctrine, all these things, trying to understand what was going on, because Jesus references as the days, and as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be again. So that's okay, so what's he talking about? That's why the books are coming out. Now we can really understand how messed up at levels you can't even imagine the world was and the world is today. but it's information control. So the enemy cannot stop this information coming forward. All he can do is try to control it, and like a river, build a dam and try to divert the information. So the Dead Sea Scrolls, for some reason, people have to ask themselves, why is this body of knowledge fought against so hard? It took 50 years. Only a small cabal of about 8 to 10 scholars in the world for 50 years were to look at those scrolls, which is, they call it the biggest scandal in history of overtext. And it wasn't until 1992 that Mike Eisman, I believe his name is, was able to wrest them away from the church or the group that had control of these. And then here again we have, just when enough people, I call it like, have been researching the Dead Sea Scrolls and reading it, because it's taking a long time to get the translations, and then you have to compare translations, so all these different things, where we're just getting to the final understanding that truly we can say authoritatively that Yeshua and the early church, the early disciples, were Essenes. Then you get this person on the scene who is all over YouTube saying, oh, no, they're Freemasons, they're Luciferian, they're occultic, they do child sacrifice, everything dark and evil and wicked, and they are the root of all secret society. I'm like, what's that all about? Because I will tell you, not one scholar, and I asked if there is no scholar out there who says this. I mean, these are the people who are translating the scrolls, reading the scrolls, digging them, except for Allegro, who, I don't know if you remember, was a little weird with his mushroom theory. No scholar has made that claim. So where is Gary Wayne coming off saying these things? So we're going to start to go through it a little bit, but I'm going to give it back to Laverne to comment on that.
Yeah, I think one of the things we should do is look at a bit of the evidence that really does identify the early Christians as having been Essenes. And then people can go into a deeper research if they like. I have mentioned that if somebody wants a copy of the manuscript that I've written, it's not actually in book form yet, I haven't had it published, but if they want it, there's simply too much information to go into any great depth here. But just a few things to consider. The church and the Essenes both called themselves the called out ones. This is the meaning of church. Both called themselves followers of the way. This can't be considered a coincidence. So what we see is that with the Essenes, it wasn't really a conversion to Christianity, but rather kind of a evolved step. They evolved into this group of people who followed Christ. But they were the same people. The same people who followed Christ were the same ones who were calling themselves followers of the way. And they believed it was important to keep the law. That never changed. This idea that we are under this radical grace, that the law is done away with, the first century Christians never believed that, never taught it. Excuse me. So just those two things, being called out and followers of the way, this points to the early Christians having been Essenes, but there is so much more. And if people actually took the time to read non-canonical books, such as what Protestants call the Apocrypha and the Dead Sea Scrolls, the writings of Enoch, what they would see is that in the New Testament, there is more reference to non-canonical books than what there is to canonical books. And unfortunately, many Christians, because they only read the Bible, they've been told all other books have been designed and orchestrated by the devil. Because they don't read these books, they don't know this. But Jesus and the apostles and the early Christians, they were reading books and teaching from books that today people are saying is of the devil. And this really, when you think about it, it's blaspheming the Holy Spirit. To say that a book is of the devil when it's actually being divinely inspired and written, well, you're blaspheming the Holy Spirit, and that's a very serious sin. So, yeah, when we look at the evidence, I don't know if you want to go more into the evidence or if you want to wait it to Wayne.
Yeah, I have one more point I need to make, because to me this is the overarching issue here to me, because you can read the text, because people who listen to my tube, channel and your YouTube channel know that we're all about the extra canonical books. I mean, that's no secret, and that's foundational. But to me, the larger question here is, like I said, why is it information control? Esoteric, what we're finding out is what is being released to us, let us put this way, is what's called esoteric knowledge, which is hidden wisdom, which is, and this is purposely done. And this is a tradition that we have all been trying to explain to people. You take books like, or quotes from like Ezra, set 2 Ezra, about when he rewrote the books that 70, he was told, were called books that were to be given to the wise, or kind of hidden and given to people. The wise people are very mature, who know their scriptures. They're a different category. These books were called what is called the writings. So when Paul said, well, bring me my writings, if you were Jewish, if you had a Hebraic understanding, you would know what these words reference. Okay. The problem is, and this, I'm just going to take a minute, Laverne, because I really want to, at this point, kind of paint this bigger picture. What's at stake here is, as esoteric knowledge comes back to us through these readings, how you slant it, how you twist it, how you do your pesher, which is a Dead Sea Scrolls concept of how you interpret it. Okay. Number one is determined by what, if you think it's an inspired text or not, what your attitude towards the text is, you know, where you think it came from and all these things. So to poison the water, this is called what it's, you know, to poison the waters, to muddy the waters so the sheep won't go and drink from it. And we'll call this the Dead Sea Scrolls, is a highly done tactic of the enemy. Okay. I just want to say, there's a scholar out there called Rachel Eller. She is a big scholar at the University of Jerusalem, a Dead Sea Scroll expert. And she's Jewish. She has a tremendous understanding of the Hebraic writings. She will say herself that 70% of the texts that are coming back to us from the Dead Sea Scrolls, that Jews had they were off their radar. They were gone. So this is another flag. It is in the esoteric knowledge, and I just need to take a minute to explain to people what's at stake here, because some of the things that Gary Wayne says, where he gets his information, the only place that I have found that he is getting a lot of this information from is Freemasonry sites. This information is not anywhere in legitimate scholars of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I can't emphasize that enough. So you have to understand what the Freemason, a secret society, because if you listen to the channel, you got to understand there's two sides to this thing. The dark side has their occult knowledge. We have our occult. We have this Christian, this is what we're trying to tell you. We have a huge body of occult knowledge, hidden knowledge that Enoch said was saved for the generation of the last days, the elect, right? Remember, we talked about that verse in Enoch. Maybe you can, and also talk about, there's two references specifically to this in Revelation and in Enoch. And I will bring up the verse from Revelation, and you can talk about the one for Enoch for a second.
Yeah, in Revelation 12, verse 15, it describes a event, and it's something that most scholars have missed. Most Christians, people who are interpreting end-time prophecy, they've completely missed this one. And this is that when Revelation talks about the dragon trying to drown the woman with a flood of water, most scholars, most Christians have missed the fact that this is talking about lies. And we find descriptions of water coming from the mouth being spewed onto people in the Dead Sea Scrolls and other writings as well. So the water that is coming from the mouth of the dragon is lies that the dragon is trying to drown the bride of Christ with. It's all of the lies, all of the deception, all of the false doctrines, and so on. And then when we are told the earth opens up to swallow this water, to swallow the lies of the dragon, this is actually the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls and other books. The earth literally opened up by way of archaeology. So these books that had been hidden away for many centuries have been made available to us.
And restored.
And restored, yeah. So we have to understand what this event is. And it's an event that you won't find many pastors or preachers talking on. They'll talk about Revelation 12, but very few people, what I've found anyway, will give a interpretation of what the water is that comes from the mouth of the dragon and what it means when the earth opens up. And it's amazing that it is a actual literal event. I mean, the earth literally has opened up to give us these ancient texts so that we can show the lies of the dragon for what they are. And one of the lies is that the Bible includes all of God's written word. So
yeah, and we're talking about, like you say, if you're a Protestant, the 66 books.
right.
That's because there's different canons out there having some more or less.
Yeah.
Well,
But even
none less, but
even the Ethiopic Bible
right.
has
96.
with all the books that it has, it still does not contain all of God's written word.
Right, right. But if they did a much better job, in my opinion, they even kept Josephus in their larger canon, which is like a one-stop shop. So I want to say, and then there's a verse in Enoch that talks about how the books have been saved for the last days generation. This is the whole point. The point of all this information coming so that the elect will be able to dispel darkness, and we will be able to shine like lights in the firmament with 360 degrees. Our light will shine. And that's just all what I want to say about this. This is highly apocryphal wording. And this is something I have to say. It is done purposely. This is why if you had the keys, you would understand this apocryphal interpretation that Laverne is bringing forward. I am. Now, I'm just going to go to one other screen here really quick to bring this up, because this is an important, again, and then we'll get more into the meat of this thing, but to paint the bigger picture, this esoteric knowledge that was for the wise, okay, for the last days, has been kept by and large in the house of Judah, okay, and this is something we have to understand. This is, a lot of it has been housed in what has been known as the Oral Torah. You see my chart here, which has been known as the Zohar, is coming down to us as Kabbalah. Kabbalah means receiving traditional, receiving orally the keys, the hidden understandings. Okay, and I've talked a lot about this, I'm not going to, but this is very important. And if you look at this chart, it is a straight shot from Judaism down to the present day. Okay, it is a tradition, and I'm going to have someone on one of my next shows who is a Kabbalist from a Spanish family going way back to the Middle Ages to Spain, and he's going to explain to us in greater detail how this knowledge has been kept for us. Okay, and this has been prophesied. This was part of the birthright of Judah, to keep the writing, so to speak, in the house of Judah. We owe them a great debt. Okay, now, did the Jews always interpret it correctly? No. Did the Christians do any better job? No. All right, but I want people to see over here, as the spin-offs come down, you have, let's see if I can do this, you have Pythagoras, you have the Greeks, you have the Egyptians. See, in the world of esoteric knowledge, there is knowledge from the dark side. There is, so when Enoch is a very important code word, because you have Enoch, son of Cain, you have Enoch, son of Lamech, of the righteous bloodline. I've never seen any books, actually, that says that Enoch, son of Cain, wrote a bunch of stuff. I bet you he did, but it's not, and it was probably kept in their archives of very secret societies. But we do know that our patriarchs wrote and kept alive information from Adam going all the way through to us today. And this is really important to understand. But what happened was in the Christian church, so what I'm trying to get at here, Christians need to understand occult knowledge in and of itself is not a bad word. Occult just means hidden. And it's proven biblically, I've done teachings that there is knowledge that is kind of set aside and reserved for those who can handle the meat of the word. In other words, you do not teach children, you don't put children in kindergarten and then start teaching them PhD level physics. It just, nobody in their right mind would do that. You have to wait, you have to grow them up until they're ready to handle this, okay? This is sort of But a lot of this information came into the church in the Middle Ages. The church rejected it. It did go into the Freemasonry, a lot of the secret societies that at that time and since then have been infiltrated heavily by the dark side. So this is why in the release of information, you really have to do your homework. You have to know who the players are. You have to understand this whole concept, and you have to check, cross-reference everything people say that would need to be Berean to know where is your stream, like Laverne just said from Revelation. Is it coming from the dragon who is spewing out? Because we know it talks about good, bitter waters and clean waters. A stream cannot be both bitter and clean at the same time. This is the whole apocalyptic understanding. You're either getting your information from the clean stream, or you're getting it from, a polluted, muddy stream. And you have to be very careful, and you have to check. And we can do this now with the internet, with checking with each other by reading the primary text and being Berean. So that's why Gary Wayne, I can't believe he's saying this stuff. I can't believe that Christians, now let me just show my last thing. And I can't believe that people are just lapping this up. This is unbelievable to me. Let me get rid of this. I'm going to show you one last thing. Sorry. Here, this is Gary Wayne. Okay, now I'm not saying he might be a great believer, he might be a great guy. I'm just telling you the information he is putting forward on these scenes is false. This is one from Cast Them Off Ministries. This is a great one to watch and to do your homework on. And now we will get into the meat of this, because and another last thing, we'll have to discuss what Gnostic is versus, Cabal. They're not the same animal. And he tries to lump everything together. They're not at all the same. So Laverne, I'm going to end on all that and give it back to you. Sorry.
Yeah, just to mention other channels that he's been promoting his book on. One is called Now You See TV.
Right.
And I was thoroughly disappointed to find out that this was the case. The reason is I had begun to follow Now You See TV because they taught the importance of keeping the law. And I thought, this is a channel that's growing, and I believe they were teaching some very important things that people needed to hear. They are really promoting the idea of home church, and I think that's important. I think that's how it's going to be in the end hour. So then when I found out that they teach such derogative teachings regarding the Essenes, I was just really disappointed. I mention this because there probably are some, because there are Christians, or because there are people who are following me, are subscribers, because they believe the importance of the law, they may also be following Now You See TV. And I think they need to know some of these things that they are saying and the people that they are promoting. So all I can say is I'm disappointed with Now You See TV because they had been promoting the teachings of this guy. But with that said, would you mind if I just shared a little bit more information about the Essenes, why I say?
Absolutely.
All right.
Can I make one last point? I'm sorry, but just for the record, to Now You See TV, I was supposed to go on April 5th and be able to have a rebuttal to this. If I have my Facebook, my private messaging record of this, that I have been in touch with them to do this, and the night came and went, and I never heard boo, and I have tried ever since to get in touch with them, and they are totally not responding. So I just have to put that out there. This is a free country with free press, free information. I cannot see any reason why a legitimate rebuttal could not be put on that channel. So that being said, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to share now, just if I can. This is from, if I can bring it up. Okay, this is from the manuscript that I've written. And I'd like to just show a little bit of information about Jesus himself and how and why it is that I say he was in the scene. And this is just touching some of the surface points. when you look at like John the Baptist, I explained in the book that John the Baptist actually was probably the righteous teacher that is spoken about in the scrolls. When you look at the Bible, and if all you read is the Bible, it doesn't tell you what happened to John's parents or how it is that he escaped the death squads that were sent.
Mm-hmm.
What we find in a gospel that isn't in the Bible, written by James, his brother, is called the Protoevangelion. He describes that John's father, who was a priest, was actually killed. And if we know this, if we understand this, that his father was killed during this rampage where they were killing all 2-year-olds and under, it makes sense then that John's mother would take him to the Essenes. And that's what we kind of find being explained in the Protoevangelion. John's mother takes him into the mountains. Well, this explains how John would have become an Essene and why the Bible describes them as being in the wilderness. It's all right in line. And then if you read the hymns of thanksgiving from the scrolls, it tells us that, or the writer of that scroll describes his father having never known him and his mother abandoning him. Well, this then explains how John ended up with the Essenes. His mother took him there. The Essenes were known for taking children in. His mother was very, along in age at that time when she had John. So there's all of this evidence that John was in the scene. And then, as I'd like to share here, Jesus was as well. We find in the Dead Sea Scrolls, it's scrolled by the title of the Redemption and Resurrection Scroll. And there are 4 points from this scroll. I may not get into them all, but I'd just like to share a couple of them. One is that there's a passage in this scroll that talks about the dead being raised and the heavens advancing. And in Matthew, the book of Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus talks about this. And when we understand what was written in the Dead Sea Scrolls, it's obvious that Jesus was referencing this scroll. He wasn't referencing anything from the Old Testament, from the books that make up the Old Testament, but was specifically citing a passage from the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I believe this is one of the strongest points of evidence that really points to Jesus having been in the scene. When it describes the heavens advancing, and we don't see this in the Old Testament, clearly Jesus was referencing Essene writings that were not considered inspired by the Pharisees and Sadducees. Hopefully people would be able to see that. This is the passage here from the scrolls that described it. And
I have read Laverne's book, and it's excellent. It's spot on.
Jesus also, he tells us that prisoners will be set free, that this is one of the things that are prophesied about. Well, we don't find that in the Old Testament either, but we find it in the passage from the Dead Sea Scrolls. And we know that this actually did happen. Peter was in jail, and he was miraculously released from jail. Same thing with Paul. When he was in jail, all the shackles were taken off. He would have been able to go, but he chose not to. He stayed. So this is a prophecy about prisoners being set free. And it's not in the Old Testament, but it is in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And it was being fulfilled during the time of the apostles. But the Dead Sea Scrolls talk about Sabbath laws. And one of the things it describes is that if an animal falls into a pit, you are not supposed to help it to get out of the pit. When Jesus was talking to the Pharisees and Sadducees, he brought this up, that because he was healing on the Sabbath, they had this complaint against him. But when he talks about animals falling into the pit, and that, the Pharisees and the Sadducees would help that animal out on the Sabbath, what he's basically saying is, you're not as righteous as the children of light. You are not as righteous as the Essenes. Why is it you would help an animal out of the pit?
Right, but you wouldn't heal. It
is a Sabbath law that you shouldn't. And yet you have a problem with him healing on the Sabbath. So for the Pharisees and Sadducees, they'd help an animal, but they wouldn't help people. And Jesus is saying, that's wrong. We're supposed to do good works on the Sabbath. And so he's again drawing from the Essene writings to rebuke the Pharisees. The Gospels talk about the children of light. Well, we find in the scrolls that this is how the Essenes refer to themselves, as the children of light. And there's this parable of the shrewd steward, that most people don't understand that this is actually talking about the Essenes. And what Jesus is really telling or saying in this parable is that people are supposed to be like the children of light. He specifically says this. So what he's saying is, you should be like the Essenes. The use of the term children of light is without question in a Essene terminology. And then I just wanted to, excuse me, one last point regarding
versus the children of darkness. Just that
right.
Always the contrast.
And he does refer to it. He doesn't say exactly children of darkness. Jesus says children of this world, but it's basically the same thing, children of darkness.
Or children of Belial, the sons of Belial, all referencing the two sequence.
Exactly. So the same terminology is used in the Gospels by Jesus as what the Essenes used, but it wasn't terminology that the Pharisees and Sadducees were known for. And then the fourth point I'd like to make about Jesus is the order that he did the blessing in. The Pharisees performed the blessing one way. The Pharisees did it wine first and bread second. Jesus did it bread first and wine second. And this is such a clear indication then that he was an Essene and not a Pharisee. Why Christians don't want to recognize these points, just this one fact alone, how he did the blessing, shows that he was in line with the Essenes rather than the Pharisees. And then when you consider the book of Enoch, there are over actually 100 passages from the New Testament that find their precedence in the writings of Enoch. Over 100, and yet Christians reject the book of Enoch. So there is just so much evidence for Jesus and the early apostles having been, or Jesus and the early Christians having been Essenes, that it's a wonder that people are even trying to refute this, that the dots have been so well connected. There really is no question of the early Christians and Jesus and John the Baptist having been Essenes.
Yeah, to just make a couple, that's excellent. The overarching understanding is that the Essenes are the sons of Zadok. These are the true, you can just try to paint a really big historical picture. These are the true remnant, the Netzar. The root of the word is Netzar, which means branch. This is the remnant branch that was faithful to the words and the prophecies of the prophets, going all the way back. Elijah totally revived this branch. This is the prophets, the school of prophets that Elijah started. It again, we're in a war, so they're strong, weak during different generations. But during the time of the Maccabees, the Hasmoneans, or the Maccabees, and you had the Greeks taking over the temple and besieging all these things. They went out into the desert. See, a lot of these code words. The wilderness means, and the desert. These are words that have designation. So the Qumran was in the wilderness, and that's like a noun, a pronoun, meaning that's everybody knew where they were talking about. The Dead Sea down there, that's the wilderness, that's the desert. There were different sects. Okay, so let me just say, the priests had to leave the traditional temple worship system going on because in there it had become so corrupt, because they were getting Hellenized, they were getting impure, they were stopped doing things according to the clean and unclean. There was all this paganism coming in. So they decided to leave, and I believe this is all divine inspiration, to keep themselves pure and a bloodline pure for the Messiah, because they believed this. You understand, this is so late in the game, most people are not even believing. Like most Jews today don't really believe in a second return, literally, or the Messiah of David coming, in a literal sense, really. This Zadok priesthood, who are also known as Sadducees, this is where the words get a little crazy, but when it's referring to Essenes, they're talking about the Zadokites, went into, there was two kinds, the Samaritans and you had a Qumran time. They were groups that would either assemble monastically and celibately. That's what you find in Qumran with John the Baptist. They were so focused on their mission, they were not having anything to do with the affairs of this world. At the same time, you would have groups of Essenes associated who would still carry on family life, who would still have children, who would still live in communally in villages and have all things common. So you have to understand, it is a bigger, there are many ways to walk this thing out, like even today. Okay, we're not all in one group, the elect. We are kind of spread out. But in the time of the Essenes, they were trying to network themselves together. They had all things common. They had a common purse. They would go from town to town, and they would not take an extra cloak or another pair of shoes. They would carry a weapon. These are all little codes, understandings that would, when you read the Gospels now and you understand how the scenes operated, you can make these connections. You can connect these dots. There's so many. Ananias and Sapphira, that whole story makes sense in an Essene backdrop. There's so, and Laverne does a great job of going through in detail some of these things. But I just have, one of the things that Gary Wayne does, and this is, I have to say this, see, this is what Paul ran up against, and it's alive and well today. There's such a thing as called rhetoric. We don't understand what that means. People who can string a bunch of phrases together flawlessly and effortlessly. Okay, so if you're in a debate and they just flow together, they're seamless, and it from idea to idea, and you're kind of almost like bewitched by it. Like there's no room to take a breath. It's just like you go from, you just say statement to statement to statement to statement. Unless you're really sharp, it's like, oh, it all actually flows together. See what he does. That to me is a kind of a tip-off. You have to stop and give your citations. Any true Bible scholar will give citations. In all of the videos I've ever watched, there were no citations. He will quote Josephus, but then he'll say, yes, and Josephus said such and such, and he'll say, before we find out, Josephus never said that, and he'll never actually read what Josephus says. Okay, so you have to be, that's why I say we have to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And I'm just going to read a couple little quotes, and then Laverne, you can take it back to Josephus, what he says about these people. But because one of the charges laid by Gary Wayne is that their fruit, Yeshua very clear, you will know a tree by its fruit, and that these people were dark and involved in, witchcraft and everything negative on a secret society thing that we're understanding today, worshiping fallen angels. That's okay. Let me read you what Josephus actually says. He says the doctrine of the Essenes is this, that all things are best described. Well, let me just start with this one above it. He says, because between Pliny, Philo, and Josephus, Lightfoot, some others, before the Dead Sea Scrolls, there were plenty of citations to give you an idea that these people were holy. Nobody at the time in Judea would have said this, that they are free, they're occultic secret society. Now, maybe there were spin-off groups that would get a little off, okay, into what we today would call a cult. Okay, but that's not what we're talking about. Gary Wayne is trying to paint the whole kettle black. Okay, so Josephus says, Many of these Essenes have by their excellent virtue been thought worthy of this knowledge of divine revelation. They were known as the keepers of the secrets. Okay, we've been through this. The doctrine of the Essenes is this, that all things are best ascribed to God. They teach the immortality of the souls and esteem that the rewards of the righteous are to be earnestly striven for, meaning you keep Torah to the best of your ability. They do not offer sacrifice. There's a whole thing about the meat sacrifice. We won't get into that. It is their course of life. Okay, yet it is their course of life better than that of any other men, and they entirely addict themselves to husbandry. It also deserves our admiration, how much they succeed all other men that addict themselves to virtue, and this in righteousness, and indeed to such a degree that as it hath never appeared among any other men, neither Greeks nor barbarians. Now that sounds like a pretty good resume. There's no way you can take those words by Josephus and turn around and say that their fruit is bad. This is what I mean, people. You got to do your homework. This, and if Yeshua, this is what I'm saying, if our Savior was going to come out of any group, isn't that a beautiful group to come out of? That you have Josephus saying that there has never appeared among any other men such a loving group of people. And then I just want to make this last point. They also take great pains in studying the writings of the ancients. Okay, because another thing, there's just so many things to reference. We should probably be more linear. This whole idea that their knowledge comes from Enoch, the evil, the seven sacred sciences, all this stuff. That is so not true. When people, the studying the writings of the ancients, this refers to our patriarchs, Enoch, Abraham, Shem, and Isaac. Listen, if you're of the righteous root, if you're not what root are you following? Those are your ancients, okay? These are our fathers in the word. These are the writings that we are following and tracking with. So they take great pains in studying the writings of our patriarchs and choose out of them what is most for the advantage of their soul and body, and they inquire after such roots and medicinal stones as may cure their distempers. They were also known as great healers. They had a huge tradition. They were keeping alive the tradition that Jubilees mentions, that comes from, that's mentioned in Jubilees, that when let me get my people right, when Noah is like upset with the Lord in a sense because his boys are being plagued by all these demons now, these spiritual souls that are out there, this negative that is plaguing their boys, especially with sicknesses and diseases. God gives him all this information about how herbs, medicinal cures for all this. This is another indication that these were people keeping alive good knowledge for the benefit of all, and they were known as great healers and therapeutics. So, back to you, Laverne.
How he gets from that they worship fallen angels, it's just ridiculous. Now, one thing Josephus does mention is that they keep the names of the angels.
Right, let's talk about that.
But that is not the same thing as worshiping fallen angels. We today want to know and should want to know the names of the righteous angels and the names of the unrighteous angels, the demons, and so on. We want to be able to separate them. For one thing, because there is meaning in names. So we want to be able to recognize, and we should want to know.
You keep talking, I gotta get some.
I'll just continue talking. We should want to know who the fallen angels were, their names and so on, and we should want to know what the names were of the righteous angels. People don't have a problem with the fact that in the Bible, they mentioned the names Gabriel and Michael. Don't have a problem with that. We've kept those names. And yet, for some reason, this guy has a problem that the Essenes, because they kept a much better record of the names of angels, well, this means then that they worship fallen angels. And it's
right.
Just ridiculous, the stretch that he has taken. And then the thing is, if people don't actually read Josephus, if they just take his word, they read his book or they watch him on YouTube, and they say, okay, this guy says,
Says Josephus.
yeah, if they say, well, Josephus
Said so and so.
said such and such, and they don't look into the writings of Josephus themselves, well, they'll just become blind sheep following this guy, and they'll end up believing what he's saying. And fortunately for channels and people who are part of Now UCTV, and I know it may sound like I'm picking on them, but they are one of the bigger YouTube channels that are supporting this guy. So the fact that they themselves have not checked out this guy's research to see if there's truth to it or not, I find it very, very disappointing. Yeah, that's about what I wanted.
Right. Well, I just want to make a couple points on the angels. See, and this is what is, to me, the crux of the matter. Because like I said, Satan cannot keep God's information stream from coming to us. All he can do is try to build a dam and divert it away from us. Why it's important on the angels. Now, I've heard Gary Wayne say this again, and I was like, how can he say this? Anybody who does a word study, the words Netzar, the branch, Essene, Nazarene, you're all going to come back to the same concept, basically, of a righteous remnant. Okay? He talks as if the word Essene, it goes back to a root to a watcher, okay? And that immediately refers to watcher angels. And I'm like, there is no Strong's that does that. There is nothing in Bible research that you can find that connects those dots. That is patently false. What he is saying, he's twisting, okay, they are watchers. In other words, the word has a little connotation because they are keepers of the secret. They're apocalyptic. They are watching the signs of the times. I mean, you have to be very careful today, especially because, deceit is going to multiply. Lying signs and wonders. This is why the elect, if you're going to be a virgin with oil in your lamp, you cannot fall. You cannot listen to people. Don't listen to what Laverne and I are saying. Go and check it out, okay?
The thing is, even Scripture says we are supposed to be watchers. We're supposed to be watchmen.
Right.
So we're supposed to be on the walls, being watchers.
Right.
Well, how can he have a problem with the fact that the Essenes were watchers?
Right.
They were doing exactly what is expected and what they are told to do. They were being watchmen. They were being watchers. So I don't.
But he does this. This is what I have to tell you. He does not quote you Strong's number so and so, and you could, okay, which I do. I'm sure Laverne does. Anybody who's doing this here will tell you, okay, this is the word in the Hebrew. It's referencing here in Strong. None of that. He just, in a rhetorical way, he says watchers refers to watcher angels. Okay, see, this is where it's very. And Paul always had to combat people like, see, the Greeks are really good at this. This is okay, anyways. But I want to just bring this up to the war scroll. This is very interesting because this is what's really interesting, the whole concept of the relationship that we have with angels. Now, let me tell you something. Did Yeshua interface tons of times with angels? Did he have any problem? Angels are ministering to him after the 40 days fast. He says at one point, look at, don't worry about it. I can call down all the armies of heaven, angels, anytime I want to stop this whole thing, stop you guys from crucifying me, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
he didn't have a problem with them. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was totally comfortable with this world of, and then he talk about in the sons of Belial, and Belial is a reference for Hasatan. That's sort of the Dead Sea Scroll most common word they use for him, okay? But there is something in the last days, on the day when the Kittim fall, okay? And now we know Kittim, refers, actually, I would say in its broadest sense, it is the people group that is dogging the true remnant in the generation. So it could have been the Romans at the time, because obviously it was the Romans that were besieging and finally raised Jerusalem at the time, right after Yeshua. And then it could be the Edomites today. But the word, in my opinion, refers to the people that will be used, Hasatan will use to come against the people of God. So at the day when the Kittim fall, there shall be battle and terrible carnage before the God of Israel, and that shall be the day appointed from ancient times for the destruction of the sons of darkness. Praise God, that's what we're coming to, and I can't wait. Let's get this thing done. At that time, the assembly of gods and the hosts of men shall battle, causing great carnage. On the day of calamity, the sons of light shall battle with the company of darkness amid the shouts of a mighty multitude and the clamor of angels, and the clamor of gods and men to make manifest the might of God. And it shall be a time of great tribulation for the people which God shall redeem of all its afflictions, and none shall be as this, from its sudden beginning to its end in eternal redemption. Now my point is this, look at, we have to start getting comfortable that we're not alone. I think the elect, see, this is to me this for the school of the elect. We're coming up on a time, we all know this, on a shift, the millennium, and all wickedness is going to put down, and we are part of the army of God. But there are many parts in the Dead Sea, in this, the war scroll, which is basically a polemic war. So if people are freaking out, thinking I'm, taking up ours, it is polemic in its essence, meaning it's a war of words, like we were saying, Laverne was saying about the stream that the dragon was going to spew. Okay, lies, falsehoods, crooked places. These are a lot of the ways the Bible talks about this, okay? But we're not alone. We have angels on our side, okay, that help us fight our battles. And we need to get comfortable with this. And historically, one of the problems has been in the human, that we have not always, because it talks about in the camp that the angels, let me just reference this. In this usage of the word gods, we're not talking about like big God, G, Elohim, or the Father. Or these are spiritual entities. These would be really angels. Okay. I think Dr. Mike Heiser does a very good job of showing that the word Elohim refers to spiritual entities, which a lot of times we get the word angels. Okay. So we're talking about angels. That in the camp of the righteous, the angels and the seed of Adam, right, will be able to do battle side by side, and there'll be no hybridization issues between them. That is a major issue, because if you understand history, that has not always been true. From Eve to Genesis 6, there has been a problem between humans and angels cohabitating. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that. I just have to throw that out. So it's very important that we get to the bottom of this concept of angels. My other understanding is that the Essenes kept the names of the watcher angels or the fallen angels, almost trying to keep it under lock and key. Because see, you can use the names. That's why names are so powerful and important. In a lot of dark magic rituals, you use the names of the angels, and vice versa, so to speak. So this is a whole concept that needs to be fleshed out. It is for the mature and the elect, but to say that the Essenes are worshiping fallen angels is a patent lie.
Yeah, and the other thing too is he teaches that they were a polytheistic sect. That they believed in many gods, and again, Josephus doesn't say anything about that. None of the contemporary writers of the time, Pliny and Philo, none of them say that they worship many gods. There's nothing in the Dead Sea Scrolls to even suggest.
Right.
Not even the smallest suggestion. It's simply not there. So for him to say that they were polytheistic and that they worship many gods, that really is a blatant lie. And from the videos I watched, again, he gives no citation. He just says they worship many gods, and so people who are watching his videos, they'll simply believe it. If they haven't looked into the Essenes, or some of the problem is that people want to believe something. They want to believe, for example, all of God's written word is in the Bible. It is contained in 66 books. So if someone's going to come along and say that people who are saying differently, then they'll gravitate to and they'll grab onto any argument, no matter how unsound it is. And these are the kinds of people who will follow a guy like this. They don't want,
Itching ears.
Yeah, and they purposely, or they purposely choose not to research what this guy's saying. They hear it, okay, I believe it. And we find it the same thing with many atheists in arguments for atheism. A lot of things that they'll say about scripture and about God and Jesus and the early Christians and so on. They don't want to know the truth. Like you say, itching ears. As long as they hear something that appeals to what they already believe, then they won't look any further.
Right.
It's a serious mistake. And that comes to a person's cardinal mind. People are cardinal minded. That's how their mind works. They are not spiritually minded, so they don't want to know about true spiritual things. Yeah, so that is one more point. The point about being polytheistic is that right there is a huge red flag.
Which means you've never really done any of the reading of the actual text. Someone is feeding them, and this because it always comes down to they're monotheistic. It's mono versus one versus poly versus which is many gods. Judah, he's always been. Israel has always worshipped one God. This is the whole point of it. But within this one God, see, this is the whole. There are many. Yeshua, he's wearing many hats. The Hebraics are very deep and thoroughly vetted, I would say, in their understanding of the different. That's why there's so many names. He's the Lord of Hosts when he's the head of the armies. I don't want to go into all these different Hebrew names. Yahweh is different. Elohim, the Lord God. There's a lot because he has many different. And they call it emanations. And I've started to teach on all this. This is very Kabbalistic and it's very accurate and true. And this is, to my opinion, the next wave that people have to get up to speed on is the Zohar, is the Kabbalah, what information is in these. And this is a very proving monotheistic. So they're not polytheistic. That's totally false. Let me ask you a question. Let me make another point here. I want to talk about, okay, there's another thing that he does. He kind of tries to lump together the Gnostic texts and the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, in my opinion, they're totally different animals. One's an apple, one's an orange. As far as I know from research, no one is out there saying definitively yet who wrote the non-canonical codices, because I'm assuming that's what he means by Gnostic. Or that's one I'd ask if I could. What is your definition? Are you just talking about just knowledge, hidden knowledge, initiated knowledge, or are you trying to reference that to mean the stream of writings that we would call today Gnostics and non-canonical, which none of them were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls? I believe only one, and I may have been a Pistis Sophia. Do you know, Laverne?
No, I can't. Yeah,
as far as I know, no verifiable non-canonical codice was found within the Dead Sea Scrolls except in maybe one.
And the thing is, there are more scrolls being found too. So I may not be up on,
right.
The latest scrolls from the past 4 or 5 years. My research is done from a copy of the scrolls that I have that is a few years older than that. So.
But he's constantly trying to lump together the Gnostic texts and the Dead Sea Scrolls, and he's constantly trying to throw in really spurious by most people's Gnostic texts like the Gospel of Judas or the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. Okay, so if people don't understand what these things are represented, and they're just all getting lumped together. The non-canonical codices were found in Egypt, over 500 to 600 miles away from the actual location of Qumran, south of Jerusalem in the Dead Sea area, right? I doubt in that day people groups, that's a large geographic difference, 12, 13 hours today by car. They're not at all the same stream. Now, I think there's a lot of great, I think you would read the Nag Hammadis because there's a lot of information. They're interesting. I do believe that they are inferior in a lot of ways to what's in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but it also has to be very clearly cleared up that there is no verifiable relationship of writings, tradition, or sect, I mean, like people, with the Nag Hammadi codices and the Dead Sea Scrolls. There is the Egyptian therapeutics. Also, many that have extremely similar lifestyle attributes and Essenes, and I could be like their cousins. I mean, when you go back into Egypt and understand the whole history, and there definitely could be cousins, but there's no proof that they wrote the Nag Hammadi codices.
Yeah, and like you already mentioned, there are many books from the scrolls, though, that we don't have, that have been lost. We only have, like you were saying, 30% of what was actually there. So if there ever was a connection that you could make between the two different groups, it's probably been lost. But the other thing is, just because there are some books that are found in the library doesn't always mean that person believed in them or thought that they were inspired. I have books that actually, sometime in the near future, I'm actually going to be burning because they're books from when I first joined the church that I believe are teaching. They're basically the same thing as sorcery books that were burned in first century Christendom. They burned their books that contained sorcery. Mm-hmm. And I believe I have books in my house that were written by pastors and preachers who are not of God, and I need to do something to get rid of these books. But I have these books, and the same thing would have been for the early Christians and for even for the Pharisees and Sadducees, for all people. You sometimes had books that you would have to read in order to refute. So just because a book was found in a huge library does not mean that they believed what was written in it. Now, the thing is, I did want to stress is that he takes books like the Gospel of Mary Magdalene and the Gospel of Judas, says that these were what the Essenes were known for, writing these types of books. But there's no evidence.
Citation, please.
Yeah, but even if it had been a Essene that wrote that, it doesn't mean that's what all the Essenes believe. We look at the 40,000 plus denominations in Christianity today, and the different teachings that are out there. You could watch one video of a Christian pastor today, and after watching that video, make the claim that all Christians believe what that person was teaching. For example, there's a guy by the name of Steven Anderson. He's made a number of what I would call outrageous videos and claims, teachings. In it, he says we are saved by faith alone. He teaches once saved, always saved. But then he also teaches, and I've heard him say this, if you believe in evolution, you're not saved. If you believe women should have the right to vote, you're not saved.
Right. The extreme.
He says all gays should be killed, that the government should be killing all gays. Well, if somebody only watched his teaching and read what he wrote, you come away with this picture of Christians that simply isn't true. So there may have been Essenes that were on the fringe, that they were fringe cults. I'm not saying they did write these gospels. I'm not saying they didn't. But even if it could be proven that a Essene wrote them, it doesn't mean that all of the Essenes follow the same beliefs. So the fact that he uses those books and then jumps to the, he makes this huge leap that this is what all the Essenes believe.
This is what the Dead Sea Scrolls are telling us.
Yeah, but it's ridiculous, some of the things that he's saying.
Well, right, and to give a couple more, how about, the one he talks about, they wore white robes. They were known to wear white robes, flowing white robes. This is an arid desert region. So that proves that they were of the White Brotherhood secret society sect. I'm like, how can you say that? I mean, I'm wearing a white shirt today. Does that mean I'm, a secret Freemason? These are the things that can make you nuts. And as you brought up, Laverne, right? They're sons of light. This is a very common, to wear white as a sign of purity. Is a also very common practice.
Yeah, how he could say, like what you're saying that he said, it's ridiculous. And he does talk about them having initiation rites and having
right.
an initiation. Well, I say, what's wrong with that? And Christians do practice that anyway. Circumcision, it's a rite. It's a tradition. It's something that the Jews believed they had to do. You had to circumcise your son, at 8 days old. So there was this rite, that was done.
Right.
And then it was at 13 years of age and so on. Water baptism, that is a rite. There are people who say you aren't saved unless you are water baptized. If you refuse to get water baptized, well, then you're rebelling against God. You're going against one of his commandments that he gave. Therefore, you're not saved. Well, that's a rite then. It's something that you have to do in order to be saved. So how is that any different from what the Essenes were doing? Yes, the Essenes had other things that you had to do. For example, you had to prove yourself before
you were worthy.
Become a member. Yeah, you had to prove yourself worthy.
Yeah, you had to be able to walk the walk.
Yeah.
And not just talk the talk.
And that's the way they kept the wolves out of the sheep.
We should do that a little more.
Exactly. How do you keep the wolves from coming in, or how do you keep the sheep from turning into wolves?
Right.
Well, you make sure that they're worthy before they're allowed to teach. You make sure they're worthy before you even teach certain things, so they can't corrupt those teachings. So the fact that he has a problem with them having this initiation, I say, well, we need more of that.
Right, and he just makes these blanket, like, okay, because they had initiation rites, and we know Freemasons have initiation rites, so that makes them Freemasons.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, okay, and another one he's done, because I love it. They had, all their laws were based on human tradition. I don't know where he gets that. Then he says they also were very big promoters of self-punishment and self-flagellation. Citation, please.
Yeah.
I swear.
And again, like, I haven't heard that. I don't know where he gets that from, but still, you have to prove that was the norm. That.
Give me two witnesses, right? From a text, from a scripture, from the writing.
You have to show that was not a fringe movement within the Essenes. And I talk about this actually in my book. Something I would like to explain is that there actually was a schism within the Essenes.
Right.
Not all the Essenes did believe the same thing. Some believed that Jesus was the Messiah and the Son of God. Some didn't. There were some who believed he was a true prophet up to a certain point, when we are told that they left him because the teachings were too difficult. There were those who believed in Jesus in the beginning, but then they left him, but then would have come back to him after the crucifixion and resurrection. So there would have been among the Essenes some very serious discussion about who Jesus was.
Very much so.
So the fact that there are different sects, different beliefs and so on among the Essenes, well, it's just normal, but he takes the very fringe. He takes the most ridiculous and then makes the claim that this is the norm, this is how all the Essenes were, and this is what they're doing.
And then immediately links it to the dark side. The other one he said is because they had secret or special handshakes or signals. So that's another reason why they're Freemasons. I'm like, see, this is where you have to be careful.
Well, and that's the thing. The people read the Bible and they say, Jesus talked about wolves coming in, but the Didache, the teaching of the 12 apostles, tells us there will actually be sheep that turn into wolves.
Right.
And we've seen that happen down through the century. That's why there are so many wolves in the church. It's not because, the wolf came into the church. It's because the sheep turned into wolves. And, well, that's what we see happening.
Right. And because you are really what you're taught. You are what you eat and you are what you're taught. So
the only way, and this is what they believe, the only way to prevent that from happening, to prevent turning into wolves, was to ensure that they were worthy before they could, go on from simply being a basic initiate to, learning more of the word and the mysteries and so on.
Right. Right.
So why he has a problem with that is beyond me. I think it's actually a good thing.
Right. So we'll just give a couple more things here, and then we'll kind of like have closing remarks. We should have, but I just wanted to give two more quick witnesses of other people who have researched who have. Now, Lightfoot is a great scholar. A lot of people quote Lightfoot. He was no lightweight, so to speak, in scholarship, but he says that the root word again signifies the doers or the observers of the law, referring to the strictness of Essene practice. Now, a lot of Christians will read the Dead Sea Scrolls and go, oh my gosh, these people are over the top. Well, I don't think this is something we have to understand. And because we're so weak and lax in our faith, anyone who really zealously practices what they believe in most lukewarm churches today is looked at as a zealot, So, and I mean, I've been told literally, right, calm down, tone it down, don't be so funny. No, you amp it up. So anyways, he makes these points, and it was suggested that the Pharisees were especially designated as the teachers, but the Essenes were called the doers, which proved, the whole idea of you going back to James, I will know your faith by if you do, by your works. Not just because you say you're a teacher, you say you're this. We need to look at the fruit. And this is why this long initiation, because they were the keepers of the secret. The most important information on the planet, I'm telling you people, it's been housed with this remnant, okay? And I don't think we understand. They understood what they had. They understood the seriousness of it, the ones that really got it. And they, many times, gave up their life. A lot of the early martyrs were Essenes in the Christian church. And I want to make this, they were Essenes, Ebionites, Nazarites. These are some of the spin-off words. Paul calls himself a Nazarene, a follower of that way. These are all, because a Pharisee would have called himself a Nazarene, because he wasn't. So these are all, there's all a lot of little nuances.
I'd like to add to that, the first Christians who persecuted other Christians, that was the Catholic Church persecuting Essenes. A group known as the Donatists, without question, were Essenes. These were people who were adamant that you couldn't give up the holy books even under threat of death. And so when bishops gave up the books, the Donatists, who were Essenes, said, well, they can't hold office, high office in the church. They can't even be an elder anymore. But then the Catholic Church said, no problem. Their sins are forgiven, and no big deal. And so the Catholic Church, when it came to the first Christians persecuting other Christians, it was the Gentile church, which it was the Catholic Church basically turned into a corrupt pagan church system. And they then persecuted, hunted, and killed those Christians who believed it was important to keep the law, important to keep these righteous books, that they couldn't be turned over to pagans. And so the persecution of these Essenes continued up to the time of when the church itself persecuted them. It wasn't just the Romans and
right, brother against brother.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, sorry to have interrupted. I just
No, but that's a good point. See, and this is so. But we'll probably got to start to wrap it up on this note, because the Ebonites, as people are uncovering this is extremely important to understand. Detangle the root system. Okay, get the correct stream. Let's get rid of all the dams. In my opinion, this is what it means when Jesus said, I'm going to make all the crooked places straight. So there'll be a highway to God. So there's no more rabbit trails to go to. It's a straight highway for the elect that want to. So we are engaged in a very serious work here. I mean, I take what I do, I'm sure you'll very seriously. I try not to say anything that I have not really researched. And I will always say, I'm not saying any, thus saith the Lord. I am just saying to date, according to my research, this is what I think. And just take it or leave it. But it's interesting because there is a whole movement today. We've been through Messianic Judaism. We've been through the Hebrew roots. I think we're coming up on a great move of the Essene remnant manifesting itself again as the elect in these last days. And that's pretty exciting. So that's why a lot of this is very important. So I want to just say, Laverne and I are going to do a couple more shows. We got a couple of topics. We don't agree on everything per se yet. We're still iron sharpening iron. We're going to talk about Paul, and we're going to talk about the law and some of these other things. So it'll be very interesting. So stay tuned for those. But we will put I will put in the links, his YouTube channel, and I'm sure he said he will share this on his channel and put my link in so we can cross-reference a lot of this. So I totally appreciate Laverne, you're being with us, me and my subscribers today, and we're just going to keep the good news going forward.
Yep. Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Well, shalom, and see you again soon.
Yep. Bye.